What was it like to be under the learning tree of Eddie Graham in Florida?
Well, uh, in the industry, uh, we would hear people talk about who the great leaders were, and I kind of figured that, and Eddie Graham was kind of like the guru. He was the top guy who and at that time I remember Dr. Jerry Graham and Eddie Graham, the Graham brothers, being in the New York territory. In fact, I've got a copy of the original uh, Wrestling Review magazine that came out in the fall of, I want to say, I'm looking at the date, 1959, and the cover was Dr. Jerry Graham and Eddie Graham. And Jerry was the flamboyant one, always with a cigar, and he did the one that did all the talking, and Eddie stood there, very stoic, and he never even said anything. And of course, later on, I found out, once I was on the inside of the business, how respected Eddie was, and that he was and is one of the most brilliant people ever behind the scenes. He was a great performer in the ring. He was I wrestled Eddie many, many times, which was a great privilege and honor to have been in the ring with him. But he was, using some inside terms, he was salty.
Hmm.
He was snug, and if he reached up, if you had him in a hammerlock or in an armbar or something, and he reached up and got a handful of your hair, the back of your head, and was going to pull you down, if you were smart, you knew what the inevitable was going to be and didn't offer a lot of resistance, or you'd be eventually on the ground anyway, and Eddie'd be standing there with a handful of your hair. So,
Wow.
yeah, he was very physical. Very physical. He wasn't dangerous in that he didn't deliberately hurt people, but he was tough, and he went all the way back to the early days with Dory Funk Sr. in Amarillo. He was a huge card. Eddie was in Amarillo. I think he wrestled in the name of Rip Rogers back in the day, and then Eddie became not only a student of the business, but regarded as a professor emeritus by anybody that was in the business that was ever around him. So I really look forward to my journey, and back in those days, you would go from territory to territory, and Eddie settled in Florida, and I finally got to be there and to be around him. And when you talk about being under the Eddie Graham learning tree, that's what it was. He was just somebody that, and I've told the story in Tampa. The dressing room was up on the second floor, and there was as you came up the stairs was a door into the dressing room that the heels came out of, and you had to go around and along that railing to another door farther down that the baby faces would go in. However, there was a door on the inside where the one could access the other from the inside without the people in the arena seeing it. And I can think of more than one occasion where Eddie wasn't actually in the match, but I remember there was a tag match of four seasoned guys that was going to be an outstanding match, just with them putting their heads together to see what they would come up with. And there were these four guys that were in it, sitting around, with four folding chairs in like a circle, so that they could all make eye contact with each other and communicate. And as I look back at the scene, Eddie Graham was sitting on a separate chair, maybe 2-3 feet behind that group, but where he could, hear what they were saying. And they would go over and throw suggestions and list ideas, and just when they thought that they really had a great plan for that match that night, Eddie would just slide his chair a little closer, and he would say, "Boy, what you know." He always would start by saying that what they had put together at that point was going to be great. With no input from him. However, he something came to mind, and he said, "Think about this," and he would throw out one little thing, and that would generate another conversation to basically relook at what they had already done. In other words, he didn't want to dampen the enthusiasm and the creative ideas of the four guys that really put their heads together and came up with something that was really good, but with Eddie's input and changing a few things, it went from being really very good to being excellent. And that's what Eddie was so good at. And he basically took the ingredients of what they had come up with and then added some things to make it even better. And that was the essence of Eddie Graham. Florida has to be right up at or near the top of my list because of the fact that I had a chance to be there under the Eddie Graham Learning Tree. And Eddie was actively wrestling at that time too. And I remember on Friday nights, Mike Graham was kind of growing creative on the creative side, and on Friday nights they ran two towns. One was in Tallahassee in the northern part of the state of Florida by the Panhandle, and Fort Lauderdale was down in close to Miami. Well, Mike Graham, I think, had a sweetheart down there, so that every Friday he was on the Fort Lauderdale card, and that left me basically going to Tallahassee every week, which was fine with me. And driving distance were about the same, and Fort Lauderdale probably had the potential of maybe drawing a little bit better, where you can make a little more money. But because I was going to Tallahassee every week, and Eddie kind of knew that Eddie got a hold of me and said that he wanted me to basically run that town. And he said, "I think you've earned the right to push yourself and to program yourself, because you're going to be there every week." And he said, "And I want to help you with my experience, and that it would be a good learning experience for me and good for my reputation in the business to be able to have a town that basically I was running in the Florida territory." And Eddie, wanted to basically ensure that he had a lot of confidence in me, which was good for my self-confidence, and with his help every week. And then it got to the point where, the town was really, really doing well. And Eddie said, not that Eddie, he certainly didn't need to work and didn't want to be on the road all the time, but he finally said, "I'd like to come up there and work a 3 or 4 week program with you," which, I would never have felt right asking him if he would consider doing that. And when he basically threw the idea out there and volunteered to do it, I mean, I was ecstatic. And so he came to the town, and for 4 weeks, we worked the program and just did incredible business. But that was the peak of me being under the Eddie Graham Learning Tree, and I got to see firsthand that everything that was said about him and his reputation in the business, it was all true. And then I don't think the things that were said about him did justice to really how brilliant he truly was. He was, of all the people in all of my years, over a half century being around the business, he was the one guy who had the greatest influence on me. And I'm just blessed that I was in Florida at a time where Eddie was still active, and had a chance to be under the Eddie Graham Learning Tree.